If you keep a gun for home protection, watch this before you need it. The gun you chose could work against you when it matters most. Home defense is nothing like the range. It's dark, loud, stressful, and you may have seconds to react. A firearm that works fine for hunting, carry, or target shooting may become harder to use under that kind of pressure. Today, I'm covering 10 home defense choices that can create real problems under stress, and one option that's consistently considered a more reliable, forgiving choice. This isn't about brand loyalty, it's about what actually works when you're under pressure. Let's get into it. 10. Full-size hunting rifles in the bedroom. A deer rifle like a .30-06 or .270 is excellent for hunting, designed to deliver accurate, powerful shots at hundreds of yards. That's exactly what makes it a poor fit for home defense. Inside a typical home, distances are only 15 to 30 feet. A powerful hunting round loses very little energy over that distance and can pass through multiple interior walls, potentially endangering family members or neighbors. That's why the concern with hunting rifles isn't stopping power. It's where the round ends up. In a home defense situation, every shot carries the risk of hitting something or someone beyond your intended target. Great for the field, far less forgiving inside a house. 9. Any handgun kept unloaded for safety, with ammo stored separately. This comes from a good safety instinct. Keeping firearms and ammunition separate can help prevent unauthorized access, especially with children around. But applying that same approach to a firearm intended for emergencies creates a problem. If the gun is unloaded, you may have to find it, locate the ammunition, and load it, all in the dark, half asleep, and under extreme stress. Fine motor tasks like inserting a magazine or loading rounds can become much harder when adrenaline hits. What takes seconds at the range can take far longer under pressure. A home emergency doesn't give you time to calmly figure it out. 8. Micro-compact pocket pistols as a primary bedside gun. Micro-compacts and pocket pistols are designed for one thing: comfortable concealed carry. Their small size, limited capacity, and lightweight frames can work against them in a home defense situation. Small grips provide less control, especially with sweaty or shaking hands, making recoil and trigger control harder. Lower capacity means fewer rounds and smaller controls, which can make reloads more difficult under stress. More felt recoil is another issue. Lightweight pistols tend to produce sharper recoil, making accurate follow-up shots harder, especially for someone under extreme stress. Great for concealment, but those same features can make them less forgiving for home defense. 7. Rifles or shotguns with heavy optics and no backup iron sights. Magnified optics are a phenomenal tool for exactly one thing: helping you identify and precisely hit a target at distance, in good light, when you have time to acquire your sight picture. A 3.9x hunting scope on a rifle you're using to make an ethical 200-yard shot on a deer at dawn is doing exactly its job. Bring that same setup into a dark hallway at close range, and the entire equation flips. Magnification narrows your field of view. The higher the magnification, the smaller the window you're looking through, which makes it dramatically harder to quickly locate and track a moving target at close range in the dark, compared to simple non-magnified sights or red dot optics built for that exact scenario. You end up fighting your own equipment at the precise moment you need speed and situational awareness the most. Then there's the failure point problem. Any optic with an internal illumination source, or any electronic red dot, runs on a battery. Batteries die. Sometimes they die quietly, without warning, and you don't discover it until you're trying to use the gun in an actual emergency. If that optic is your only aiming reference, no backup iron sights co-witnessed underneath it, a dead battery doesn't just mean reduced capability. It means you have no way to aim the gun at all, beyond pure instinct. Instructors who specialize in defensive long gun setups treat backup iron sights as close to non-negotiable for exactly this reason. Redundancy matters more in a life-or-death scenario than it does anywhere else in the sport. 6. Guns with heavy, complicated manual safeties the owner hasn't drilled on. Some of the most respected firearms platforms in the world, certain 1911 patterns, several rifle platforms, various pistols with decockers or multi-position selector switches, have manual safety systems that are entirely manageable, even excellent, in the hands of someone who has drilled them extensively. The safety mechanism itself isn't the flaw. The flaw is what happens when that mechanism meets an owner who bought the gun, read the manual once, maybe fired it at the range a handful of times, and never specifically practiced disengaging that safety under any kind of simulated pressure. This matters because of what's called fine and gross motor skill degradation under stress, a well-documented phenomenon in use of force and combat psychology research. Under a genuine adrenaline response, the body prioritizes large muscle groups and gross motor function. Running, pushing, gripping hard, and fine motor control noticeably deteriorates. Precisely flipping a small lever to a specific position, in the dark, on a gun you haven't handled in months, is a fine motor task. It's exactly the kind of task that becomes unreliable precisely when you need it most. The fix isn't necessarily choosing a different gun. It's understanding that any safety mechanism has to become pure muscle memory, built through repeated dry fire and live fire practice, specifically including practice under time pressure and simulated stress, before that gun is trusted to sit on a nightstand. 5. Full-power Magnum handgun cartridges for a first-time or infrequent shooter. There's a common instinct that more powerful automatically means more protective, and on paper, that's not entirely wrong. A heavier cartridge does deliver more energy on target. The issue is what that power costs the shooter holding the gun, especially a shooter who isn't putting hundreds of rounds a month through it. Heavy recoiling cartridges, something like a .44 Magnum, or even some of the hotter .357 Magnum loads, produce sharp, punishing recoil, particularly in the compact revolvers a lot of people buy specifically for home defense. That recoil does two damaging things over time. First, it teaches a flinch, an anticipatory flexing of the whole hand and arm right as the trigger breaks, which pulls the muzzle off target and destroys accuracy, especially on any follow-up shot. Second, and just as important, it makes shooting the gun genuinely unpleasant, sometimes painful, which means owners of guns like this very often don't practice with them nearly as much as they should, precisely because practicing hurts. That creates a dangerous gap, a gun capable of serious stopping power, sitting largely unfired in a nightstand, owned by someone who's mildly afraid of their own defensive weapon. The first time that gun gets fired seriously, under genuine stress, might be the actual emergency, which is exactly the wrong moment to be discovering how much that gun kicks and how badly it throws off a second shot. 4. Long shotguns with full buckshot loads and no pattern testing done at home distances. Shotguns are, without question, one of the most consistently recommended home defense tools. That's not in dispute anywhere in this video, and it's going to come up again later. The specific risk here isn't the shotgun. It's an untested assumption a lot of owners carry into their home without realizing it. Popular culture has trained most people to picture shotgun spread as wide, a dramatic cone of pellets covering a huge area the instant the trigger's pulled. In reality, at the distances most shotgun training and demonstration happens, 25 yards on an open range, buckshot has traveled far enough to spread out meaningfully. Inside a home, at 15 feet down a hallway, that same buckshot load often hasn't opened up nearly as much as people assume. It can still be behaving almost like a single dense mass at that range, depending on the specific shell, the barrel's choke, and the exact distance. That has two real consequences. First, it means the spread makes it more forgiving assumption. A lot of owners carry into a defensive scenario may not hold true at their actual hallway distance, meaning aim still matters more than people think. Second, at close range, buckshot pellets carry significant energy and can absolutely overpenetrate interior walls, particularly hollow core doors and standard drywall, depending on shot size and load. Instructors who specialize in defensive shotgun use are consistent on the fix. Pattern test your specific shell at your specific hallway or room distance, in daylight, on paper, before that shotgun is trusted to defend your specific home layout. What your shotgun does at 25 yards on the range tells you very little about what it does at 15 feet in your hallway. 3. Guns stored in a fast-access safe the owner hasn't actually practiced opening in the dark. Quick-access safes, biometric fingerprint readers, backlit keypads, mechanical push-button combinations represent genuinely responsible gun ownership, especially in homes with children or other unauthorized users who need to be kept away from a loaded firearm. Nothing about this entry is arguing against using one. The risk lives entirely in the gap between buying a safe and actually being fluent with it under bad conditions. Biometric sensors read fingerprints optically or capacitively, and both methods can struggle with fingers that are sweaty, shaking, or positioned even slightly differently than during setup, all three of which are extremely likely during a genuine adrenaline response at 2 a.m. A sensor that's worked flawlessly every calm morning for a year can suddenly fail to read a print correctly during the one moment it actually matters. Its keypad codes carry a similar risk. A code that's pure muscle memory when you're calm and it's daylight can become surprisingly easy to fumble when your hands are shaking, the room is dark, and you're trying to enter it by feel rather than sight. Instructors who train home defense specifically recommend practicing safe access under deliberately bad conditions. Lights off, half asleep, maybe even under mild simulated time pressure, precisely because the first time you discover a safe is hard to open in the dark should never be during an actual emergency. 2. Guns chosen purely because they looked intimidating or tactical, without any range time invested. This is an extremely common pattern, and it comes from an understandable place. The visual language of serious, capable-looking firearms is everywhere in media and marketing, and there's a natural instinct to want the gun that looks like it means business. The trouble is that visual intimidation and actual shooting competence have absolutely nothing to do with each other, and buying decisions built on the former often come at the expense of ever developing the latter. An aggressive-looking AR platform rifle with every rail and attachment imaginable, or an oversized large-frame handgun bought specifically because it looks imposing in the case, doesn't make its owner more capable of hitting a target under stress. What actually determines that capability is repetition. Dozens, ideally hundreds of rounds fired, drawn from storage, aimed, and fired again, building the kind of muscle memory that survives an adrenaline dump. A gun that's been fired fewer than 50 times before being stored for defense hasn't had anywhere near that repetition, regardless of how serious it looks sitting in a safe. The uncomfortable truth instructors report seeing again and again is that the correlation often runs backward from what people expect. Owners who bought the most aggressive-looking option, banking on that alone to feel prepared, are frequently the same owners who've put the least actual range time into becoming proficient with it. Looking prepared and being prepared are not the same purchase. 1. Any home defense gun the owner has fired fewer than a handful of times total. Every single entry above this one is really a variation on the same underlying theme, and this final point is where that theme gets stated directly. The specific make, model, caliber, or feature set of a home defense gun matters far less than how much real, repeated practice the owner has put into using it. Every self-defense instructor, every use of force researcher, and every serious law enforcement training program converges on this same conclusion, because it's been observed over and over in real defensive encounters and in controlled stress inoculation training alike. Under genuine life-threatening stress, the human body undergoes measurable physiological changes: elevated heart rate, tunnel vision, degraded fine motor control, auditory exclusion, where you may not even hear loud sounds clearly. None of that can be studied away or avoided. It can only be trained through by exposing yourself to simulated versions of that stress. Shot timers, low-light drills, movement drills, enough times that your hands know what to do even when your conscious brain is struggling to keep up. A rifle with a complicated safety, a magnum revolver with brutal recoil, even one of the risky options higher on this list. Every one of them becomes dramatically safer and more effective in the hands of an owner who has put in real repetitions under real pressure. And inversely, the objectively safest, most forgiving option in the world is still a liability in the hands of someone who bought it, put it in a drawer, and never picked it up again until the night it mattered. The gun is a tool. The training is what actually determines whether that tool protects your family or fails you. Notice the pattern running through almost this entire list? It's not really about 10 different guns being inherently dangerous. It's about mismatches, a gun's design colliding with an owner's actual skill level, practice time, or the specific realities of their own home layout. That's exactly why the one gun that doesn't isn't some secret magic firearm. It's the option that, across training programs, instructor recommendations, and decades of real-world use, tends to forgive the most common mistakes on that list, even when the owner hasn't put in extensive training time. Let's get into it. The pump-action 12-gauge shotgun. Ask self-defense instructors what they'd recommend for serious home defense without extensive training, and the pump-action shotgun comes up often. Here's why. Simple controls. Most have a straightforward safety and require fewer fine motor movements than many rifles or pistols. Strong deterrent effect. The unmistakable sound of a pump being cycled has long been associated with stopping confrontations before shots are fired. Effective at close range. A shotgun can deliver multiple projectiles with each shot, which can make it more forgiving of imperfect aim than a single projectile firearm. Powerful in one shot. Its effectiveness can potentially reduce the number of rounds needed in a defensive situation. Simple operation. The basic controls are relatively easy to understand and operate under stress. Potentially less overpenetration. Depending on the ammunition and specific setup, some shotgun loads may present different penetration risks than rifle ammunition. Pattern testing and understanding your setup matters. A shotgun isn't magic, and it doesn't replace training. But for a homeowner looking for a relatively simple, powerful option, the pump-action shotgun remains a commonly recommended choice. Here's the most important takeaway. Your home defense gun is only as good as your training with it. A perfect gun you've never practiced with is less useful than a simple one you know well. This week, practice accessing it safely, in low light. Test your setup at realistic distances, and spend time at the range learning how it actually performs under pressure. Find the problems at the range, not at 2 a.m. If you disagree with my rankings, tell me in the comments. I read them all. And subscribe, because next week we're breaking down home defense ammunition and what to look for. Stay safe, train often, and I'll see you next time.